the 100 Years' War. A tale of blood, betrayal, and medieval madness. Picture this! It's the year 1337, and two of Europe's most powerful kingdoms are about to embark on what would become the longest, bloodiest, and most politically twisted conflict in medieval history. What started as a royal family squabble would evolve into a century-long nightmare that would reshape the very concept of warfare, monarchy, and national identity. This is the story of the 100 Years' War, though. Spoiler alert, it actually lasted 116 years. The spark that lit medieval Europe ablaze. The trouble began with a question that would make modern succession lawyers weep: who had the rightful claim to the French throne? When Charles IV of France died in 1328 without a male heir, the French nobles faced a constitutional crisis that would make Brexit look like a friendly neighborhood dispute. They chose Philip VI, Charles's cousin, following the Salic law that barred women from inheritance. But across the English Channel, a young king named Edward III had other ideas. Edward's claim came through his mother, Isabella, daughter of Philip IV of France. In his mind, he was the rightful king of France, and he wasn't about to let a little thing like French law stand in his way. What followed was the medieval equivalent of a geopolitical chess match played with real armies, where checkmate meant thousands of dead knights scattered across muddy battlefields when peasants humbled knights. The Longbow Revolution. Here's where the story takes its first shocking turn. For centuries, European warfare had been dominated by heavily armored knights, the medieval equivalent of modern tanks. These warriors, encased in steel and mounted on more horses, were virtually unstoppable forces on the battlefield. Or so everyone thought, until a group of English peasants proved that technology could be the great equalizer. At the Battle of Crécy in 1346, Edward III deployed thousands of English longbowmen against the flower of French chivalry. The result was nothing short of revolutionary. The longbow could pierce armor at 250 yards, and English archers could fire 12 arrows per minute. As wave after wave of French knights charged across the battlefield, they were systematically cut down by a hail of arrows. It was medieval warfare's first glimpse into the future, where common soldiers with superior technology could defeat noble warriors with superior breeding. The psychological impact was staggering. The French lost over 1,500 knights in a single afternoon, while English casualties numbered in the dozens. The age of chivalry hadn't died, but it had certainly received its first death warrant: the Black Death intermission. When war paused for apocalypse, just when the war was gaining momentum, Europe faced an enemy that made even the most bloodthirsty medieval king seem insignificant: the Black Death. Between 1347 and 1351, the plague swept across both England and France, killing an estimated 1/3 of the population. Suddenly, territorial disputes seemed rather pointless when there weren't enough people left alive to populate the territories. The pandemic created one of history's most bizarre ceasefires. Both sides were forced to pause their century-long grudge match to deal with a more pressing concern: avoiding extinction. Villages lay empty, fields returned to wilderness, and the sophisticated administrative systems that funded warfare collapsed. It was a medieval reset button that nobody had asked for. But here's the twist: when the plague finally receded, it had fundamentally changed the nature of the conflict. Labor shortages empowered the surviving peasants, traditional feudal structures crumbled, and both kingdoms emerged as more centralized, modern states. The war that resumed in the 1350s was fought by different societies than those that had started it. The warrior king who changed everything. Henry V's gamble. Fast forward to 1415, and enter one of history's most charismatic warrior kings, Henry V of England, young, ambitious, and blessed with the kind of military genius that legends are made of. Henry decided to roll the dice on one of the most audacious military campaigns in medieval history. His target was France, now weakened by civil war between two rival factions, the Armagnacs and the Henry saw an opportunity in chaos and landed in Normandy with an invasion force. What happened next at the Battle of Agincourt reads like something out of a Hollywood screenplay, except Hollywood couldn't have written it this well. Outnumbered 5-1, facing the cream of French nobility on a muddy field that seemed to favor heavy cavalry, Henry's small army should have been annihilated. Instead, they achieved one of the most stunning victories in military history. The English longbowmen once again proved their devastating effectiveness, but this time they were aided by French tactical blunders that bordered on criminal negligence. The French knights, weighed down by heavy armor, became stuck in the mud and were systematically slaughtered by English soldiers, using daggers and hammers. It was brutal, efficient, and completely contrary to the chivalric ideals that were supposed to govern medieval warfare. Henry V had shown that pragmatism trumped pageantry every time. The maid who defied destiny, Joan of Arc's impossible mission by 1429. England seemed on the verge of total victory. They controlled most of northern France, including Paris and the French crown prince. The future Charles VII was hiding in what remained of his kingdom like a medieval version of a government in exile. France appeared, finished. Then, from the most unlikely source imaginable, came salvation. A 17-year-old peasant girl from Lorraine claimed she had received visions from saints telling her to drive the English from French soil and crown the Dauphin king. In any rational world, Joan of Arc would have been dismissed as a delusional teenager. Instead, she became the catalyst for one of history's most remarkable reversals of fortune. Joan's impact wasn't just military, though. Her presence at the Siege of Orleans did inspire French forces to their first major victory in decades. More importantly, she transformed the nature of the conflict itself. What had begun as a dynastic dispute between royal cousins became something unprecedented. The world's first truly nationalist war. Joan didn't fight for a king or a noble house. She fought for France itself, for the idea that French soil belonged to French people. Her capture and execution by the English in 1431 only intensified this transformation. Joan became a martyr, and martyrs are far more dangerous to occupying armies than living generals ever could be. The English had won a tactical victory by killing her, but they had lost the war for French hearts and minds. The long goodbye. How a century of war finally ended the final phase of the 100 Years' War reads like a slow-motion collapse. England, exhausted by more than a century of continental warfare, gradually lost territory and influence. The decisive moment came at the Battle of Castillon in 1453, where French cannons, another technological innovation that changed warfare, forever devastated English forces. But the real story of the war's end isn't found on battlefields. It's found in the transformation of both kingdoms. England, expelled from continental Europe, except for the port city of Calais, turned inward and began the process of becoming the maritime power that would eventually rule the waves. France emerged as a unified, centralized nation-state under strong royal authority, setting the stage for its future dominance of European affairs. The war that invented the modern world, the 100 Years' War, was far more than just a medieval conflict between England and France. It was the crucible in which the modern world was forged. It sought the birth of nationalism, the decline of feudalism, the rise of professional armies, and the emergence of gunpowder as a military game. It transformed peasants into citizens, knights into anachronisms, and kingdoms into nations. Most importantly, it demonstrated that in the grand theater of history, the most unlikely actors can steal the show. A teenage peasant girl changed the course of European history more decisively than any king or general. English longbowmen revolutionized warfare more thoroughly than any military academy. And a conflict that began over royal bloodlines ended by creating the first stirrings of popular sovereignty. The 100 Years' War reminds us that history is never inevitable, that underdogs can triumph, and that sometimes the longest conflicts produce the most unexpected outcomes. It was medieval Europe's trial by fire, and both England and France emerged from the flames as recognizably modern nations, ready to write the next chapter of European history.